Combat is in our blood. From the dawn of time, we have versed threats big and small, strange and familiar, new and old. Combat is one constant in our lives. But while real combat has very real repercussions, video games are one market where it is all fictional. Since the beginning of video gaming, violence has always been a go-to in terms of technical aspects. Gore is always a good way to see the power of a given engine, such as with Mortal Kombat, Doom, and Resident Evil. But many people, including myself, much prefer the feeling of mastering an in-depth combat system. A form of mastery that is hard to attain, but has very real rewards for you and the people who also seek to master the same game you are playing. Combat in games is more than just fighting people to be violent. It's a challenge. That challenge has one simple goal: be the best. And that is the focus today. Games that focus on having a unique and in-depth combat system. Whether said mastery is against other players or the game itself, the point remains the same. These are games that make you want to master them and be the best. Those were just a few clips from Mofu Mofu Sensen, an arcadey fighting game from solo dev Burn Soko, with some bonus help from other people for things like music and bonus designs. The game was developed over the course of apparently 2.5 years using nothing but Smile Basic, a 3DS and Switch software that allows you to make games using it. I don't know how limited it is, but it's fascinating to know that there's full-on game development software on that console that you can buy right now. The game is most similar to games like Street Fighter or Guilty Gear. It's your pretty standard 2D fighter where two people duke it out to see who is the last person standing. In order to do so, you have a variety of moves. Light, medium, heavy, and special are your main 4 attacks, with a grab being an option that exists, and you block by holding back. There's a high-mid block by just holding back, or a mid-low block by holding down and back. Though for the most part you'll be doing a low block and then maybe occasionally do a high block. As well as all of that, there's also special moves. These can be activated through various motion inputs based on button and stick flailing combos. Doing a move successfully will do an action, and while each character only has about 3 specials, they have 4 unique variants of said special. By using the combo with different buttons, your attacks will attack, usually at different ranges, with light being a close range low risk and heavy being a long range high risk, making each character simple to understand, but hard to master. And even adding in the element of mind games, a quality I personally really enjoy. But I did say 4 buttons, and that's because if you wanted to chain one move into another one, inputting a special with the special button will consume a portion of your quarter meter and use that move, which can be cancelled into but this meter also gives access to unique attacks for the character you are playing, like an aerial grab for Vankov. And finally are your power moves. By hitting enough attacks on an enemy or taking enough damage also works, you can gain this meter which will allow you to unleash a power move. This thing can be devastatingly effective, giving you a big attack that can oftentimes end a combo or do literally nothing in the case of Siwan.
How much damage did that deal? I don't think it did a lot.
There's also this stun bar that exists, but unless you manage to get no attacks in on your opponent and they manage to get tons of powerful attacks off themselves, this thing rarely matters, but guarantees the start of a combo for the one who stuns, since even mashing buttons does nothing to break the stun. Immediately, the art style is very striking, taking more inspiration from the kimono aesthetic from Japanese furries, which is my favorite aesthetic in the entire community, and with a more washed out color palette, giving the game this cutesy art style with a more gritty and realistic atmosphere. Even the music has this bouncy and energetic sound to it. While no music really stands out, I do appreciate the use of motifs in the soundtrack and do like the main theme, but the music itself, once again, doesn't really stand out. Not just in regards to playing this game, but also when compared to other fighters. The game only has 7 characters, which is a shame since while I do enjoy each of these characters a fair bit with one exception, it does mean that the game quite quickly gets old, very fast, due to the lack of variety in characters more than anything else. Even if you choose to learn a new character, that doesn't keep you entertained for very long, because once you've learned them, well, then what are you gonna do? Go learn another character? Sure, there's only 7 of them though. This fact is also compounded with the lack of game modes. There's your story mode, a free play mode, a training mode, and that's about it. Which means that there's no online play. Now, I know that Smile Basic is going to be more limited than, say, Unity, but I can safely say that if you want to play with other people, you have to hope you know people who want to play the game and bring along a Switch setup so you and your friends can play said game. It's too much hassle in our modern world when other games just let you push a button and immediately find another player to play with. It's a minor point, but still one that I felt needed brought up. Oh, and I need to bring up the issue of health bars. See, in multi-round games, your health bar doesn't reset between rounds, instead leaving it at a specific threshold based on how much damage you took. I would say a good workaround for professional environments would be a best of 3 format, since it's more like Smash Bros, where your health doesn't reset between each stock. But the only issue is you can either do a best of 1 or best of 3. And this issue does mean that usually if you have advantage over the other player, you will generally win the round. And then there's the CPUs. Since this game offers no online and I am very much alone, we run into the issue of CPU difficulty, because on the easiest difficulty, it's like fighting hard mode bots in other fighters. On easy mode, this can lead to players dropping the game due to how hard it is to get into, making the barrier for entry much higher than other fighting games. I may have a lot of issues with this game, so it seems, but on the contrary, I actually have high hopes for this game going forward. I don't know if the dev is planning on making another game or maybe an updated game, but I do look forward to the future of this game, and I will totally keep tabs on this game going forward. I definitely think that it would be a really fun little niche fighting game that some people can go and play at like conventions and whatnot, and you know what? I'll definitely be there with them. If I ever see this game being played at conventions, you know I'm absolutely gonna hop on and play a few games with people. So yeah, this is a good game. I'd say it's one of the best I've played so far in this series. Teleport is a game created by small indie studio Unlimited Fly Games, with their only other notable game they made being a puzzle walking simulator known as Blind Spot, which also has a VR version for purchase. The game was also published by Gamera Games, a Chinese publisher who's published a lot of games. You might have heard of some of them, I don't know, there's a lot of them. Teleport was first released in early access back in December of 2019, and would eventually release a full version in November of 2020. But this is where controversy strikes, and potentially why my English-speaking audience has potentially not seen this game on their Steam before. Because when the game launched, they removed the English translation from the game, even though the game had a translation for early access content. It wouldn't be until a solid 2 years later, when in July of this year, 2022, the game would finally get a partial English translation, but with that prior issue of the game launching without the translation right after it had already had a translation being worked on, the game is still marked as unavailable in English, meaning it won't appear in English speakers' feeds unless you specifically search for the game. With such an interesting story already, and the struggle it took for me to find this game in the first place, you must be wondering what the heck even is this game? Tell me if you've heard this before. The game is a side-scroller action platformer with roguelite elements. While I will admit this is a pretty common indie game type nowadays, more specifically the roguelike, I'm more a fan of critiquing the execution over the concept, because sure, the concept itself may be incredibly generic nowadays, but the execution of said concept is actually one of the greatest I've played in years. You start by going through a brief tutorial level, teaching you how to jump, dash, attack, your healing item, buying items, all the basics you need to get started in this game, all before encountering the game's first boss, Kane. What immediately becomes apparent is the sheer amount of projectiles on the screen at once, with this being the appeal to this game in particular. Platformer bosses that are pure bullet hells. After fighting Kane for long enough, and having Will, this merchant from earlier, help us out, we get pulled into a strange rift in space, or I guess time, and wind up in a strange place with only one exit leading to a place similar to our main character's old world, but covered in a strange mud, with this being a parallel world. This is where the game truly begins, going from world to world, seeking each world's silver key in hopes to get home. A simple plot that I honestly quite enjoyed. It knows you're going to be repeating levels quite a bit, and it knows you, the player, probably don't care about the story all that much. So much like the player, Abel ends up just not caring about the main plot most of the time. Each level will follow a similar order. You go through a randomly generated level, fighting enemies, meeting NPCs, picking up items, clearing challenge rooms, fighting a mini-boss if you choose to, and meeting with each world's version of Will to buy items. But unlike most roguelikes, the items actually don't matter that much. Sure, items are things like straight up health increase or destroying projectiles with your basic attack are really good, but others are deal more damage after using your ultimate move, which doesn't get unlocked until a few deaths after starting the game, and really isn't that good of an effect all around. In general, items are not that important, because Abel's base moveset is plenty good enough. His basic attack does good damage, his secondary does about as much damage as his basic attack, and his movement is quick, snappy, and it doesn't really get upgraded with items. Instead, maybe changing with the variety of runes you can unlock, which just fundamentally change your playstyle based on the rune you've chosen to run through a world with. One of the first runes you will find is the Slam rune, which powers up your slam attack and even grants you the ability to Goomba Stomp enemies repeatedly, which is actually a really strong attack in most situations from what I've seen. It also won't be long until you meet a level's boss, with bosses ranging from Elias, a sort of mentor of Abel's, Carter, who is the future son of Abel who travels back in time, and Ophelia, the actual scariest boss in this game, with a 6-phase boss fight and a twist I will not spoil for anyone who hasn't played the game before. Each world, as mentioned before, has you seeking out a silver key. The first world's silver key is held by Carter, the second boss. The second key is held by Ophelia, who is the third boss of that world, depending on how you do the order of things, and each one unlocks the next world with its own unique addition to spice up enemies. Because not only does each boss fight differ from world to world, but also all enemies are spiced up with a new feature, such as the Revenant world having this fog that sometimes resurrects the dead, but can also resurrect you, or World 3 having these frog priest dude that massively power up all enemies in the room you are in while they are still alive. As of writing this section, I have only made it to World 3, but from what I've heard, there's about 5 worlds in this game. Unfortunately though, information on this game is extremely scarce. That, and I do want to continue playing this game relatively spoiler-free. The combination of simple gameplay that is well balanced and being a roguelike with a solid fundamental gameplay that isn't overly luck-based is highly worth praising if you ask me. I do take issue with many roguelikes having too much focus on luck, only being an issue due to the fact you may spend tons of time playing on a single run only to be screwed over by bad luck. Looking at you, Risk of Rain, Binding of Isaac. I also didn't get to compliment an aspect of games that I am well known for praising when said aspect does well: the music. And even though the majority of this soundtrack cannot be found on YouTube, and I would not recommend going to any suspicious websites, it's a phenomenal soundtrack. Nepenthe Castle, the Subterranean Rosalia, Ophelia's boss theme, those are just a few songs I absolutely love, and yet you can't get the soundtrack unless you decompile the game itself, because there's no official release, and nobody else has actually decompiled it yet that I know of. The visuals are also great, having this sort of hand-drawn style that only ever seems to break in character portraits or full renders. Even many of the attack patterns of bosses, while not necessarily visual design, are quite easy to understand after facing said attack maybe once or twice, leading to this game feeling even more fair since the game isn't very RNG focused. If you can memorize a boss's patterns, you can win against the boss. I could keep rambling about how great I find this game, or you could go spend the $15 and go buy it and play it yourself, something I recommend you go and do, because it's easily at the top of my list in terms of furry games so far. The game has some flaws, such as one item that straight up crashes your game on death called the Night Signet. Don't pick it up. Trust me, I did, and you don't want to. And some of the music balancing being way off, and even some dialogue being entirely untranslated from Chinese, meaning you may not realize that the dog bard heals you upon talking to him, and you also won't know what half the menu options do. But to be fair, I think the positives outweigh the negatives. This is a phenomenal game. I want you to go and play it. I will at least be going for finishing the game, and I recommend you go and do the same, in hopes that maybe someone out there will give us full access to the game's soundtrack. Wait. Yes. I know, this game is fairly well known about already. A lot of people still play this game, but please, I have been having enough trouble locating a third game enough as it is, and this game is a damn good game, which is why so many people like to play it. Pixel Studios is an indie studio who makes games. In fact, to this day, they've made a grand total of 2 games, as far as I can tell. A small game called Stratosphere Defense on mobile devices, and the subject of this section, Super Animal Royale. Made back during the Battle Royale craze of 2018, I actually did play this game in early access and had a great time during it. The game would eventually get its full release in 2021, however, and would see massive spikes in players leading up to the game's release, and making it still popular to this day. If you've played any of the Fortnites or H1Z1s or the PUBGs, you know what this is. You fly into a massive map with a number of other players who all drop onto said map to loot it and kill each other while a shrinking zone is keeping the action active during a game's runtime. Only this time the game is played from a top-down perspective and even has some interesting movement mechanics. While some other battle royales have had their own unique gimmicks, such as Fortnite's building mechanics, Super Animal Royale has a much simpler gimmick, that being you can do a little dodge roll to gain a boost of speed. While this gimmick may not seem like much because of the fact it's movement in a shooter game, it means that you can use it to juke opponents, unless they have a minigun. This simple movement change makes encounters really entertaining, fast-paced, and like you learn something from each encounter. No RNG, no suddenly appearing buildings upon dealing 1 damage to the enemy, and no instant cross-map headshot kills. Super Animal Royale is a battle royale without the bullshit, and I love it. I am not a fan of many battle royales. I played Fortnite in 2017 when it had first released its battle royale mode, and I've played a few more gimmicky battle royales as well, such as Spellbreak or Paladin's Realm Royale or Tetris 99. The issue is that many of these, not Tetris 99, tend to have something about them I just don't find myself vibing with. Whether it be Spellbreak's overwhelming health pools, Realm Royale's unpolished game feel, or Fortnite's general existence, for some reason Super Animal Royale is the one battle royale I actually find myself actively enjoying regularly. Normally in battle royales, the waiting room is probably the most boring part of the game, since it's usually a bunch of people running around aim training, and while Super Animal Royale has that, for the most part, most people hang around the central fountain area, just kind of vibing. Seriously, the amount of dance parties that happen here is awesome, and you're almost guaranteed to have at least one little interaction in this pre-game waiting room with other players. It's an oddly enjoyable moment of a bunch of random strangers on the internet having a brief moment together. Not to mention the gunplay in this game is pretty fun as well, on top of the massive variety of weapons you have that all feel incredibly different to each other. You also have a unique equipment slot specifically for a sort of tool, such as carrying more duct tape, more ammo, make less noise, eat bananas, I think? There's a bunch of interesting combinations, and sure, my personal preference is ninja shoes, shotgun, and an AK, but someone else may have a different preference, and that's okay. You may like the bow, or the dart gun, or the egg gun. There's a reason this game of all games is still highly active and so well known about. Super Animal Royale is a top tier battle royale. I don't think anyone who knows the game will scoff at you for playing. And all that's without even going into the sheer amount of cosmetics, with several slots for your outfit, slots for your weapon skins, and entire species you can unlock like cats, ferrets, red pandas, and tons more. If you haven't played this game for whatever reason, go play it. It's completely free, and while it has a cosmetic shop, it's totally optional, although I do feel like this game absolutely deserves the money if you happen to spend it. Those were 3 furry games. Thank you for watching. Just like last time, if you have any recommendations for future games, do let me know. I am enjoying making these videos since it lets me talk about weird, obscure games people probably haven't even heard of before, and I absolutely love doing exactly that. There will be more furry games in time to come. For now, however, we must simply enjoy the content we have here today, because unfortunately it's going to have to sustain us for the drought between uploads that I inevitably will have. So, once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in part 3 of 3 furry games. Peace out, y'all.